I'm Kevin Davis, and this is the Catholic Family Podcast. And we finally have a show that I've been waiting for since, I don't know, since Hector was a pup, right? And we're going to talk about fascism. And no, we are certainly not going to glorify it or make excuses for it. We're actually going to do exactly the opposite, because I have kind of disturbingly seen lately a trend of people trying to defend or even glorify Hitler, Mussolini, and fascism in the early 20th century. And I think that that is wrong. I think that, sure, not everything that has been said in the last 100 years about these events are true. I think there are plenty of lies. I think there were other bad guys that weren't fascist in the 20th century. Of course, we can talk about that as well. But that does not mean that these men were worthy of praise whatsoever, or that they were good. And so we're going to start off talking about what is fascism. It's kind of hard to define. We'll talk about some of the fascists of the 20th century and try to convince you why they were not good guys. But first, Kenneth, if you could tell us a little bit about who you are. You've been on the show before, but maybe give it to us again.
Yeah, so my name is Kenneth. I studied history at Franciscan University of Steubenville. I'm the history department chair at a high school in the New England area. And yeah, I'm currently working on my master's degree in history.
Nice. And Christian?
Yeah, my name is Christian. I'm from Germany, and I studied also history in Munich, Bavaria, Germany. I did there my bachelor and my master degree, and now at the moment I'm writing on my PhD. Yes.
So for anyone watching, you see these are not two guys that we just brought in off the street to talk about this topic. One of the guys is a historian from Munich, which has some ties to 20th century fascism. So I think Christian's going to have a little bit of an idea of what went on here about 100 years ago in the Munich area. But first, we're going to try to define basically what fascism means. So Kenneth, give us, what is the kind of definition of fascism?
Yeah, so this can be taken from Giovanni Gentile. It is the totalitarian philosophy of government that glorifies the state and nation and assigns to the state control over every aspect of national life. That's the working definition.
Interesting. And I know before the show, Christian, you had some comments on that. What do you take from this standard definition of fascism?
Yeah, first of all, that's more or less right, because that's what all these fascist systems, these fascist states in the first half of 20th century here in Europe did. They glorified the state, the nation, as the highest point of what human beings can be. And also, I would also like say more, a little bit more further, that like for these fascists, the individual human beings, the people, they have no worth for them, because everything is like the mass, everything is the nation, everything is the pupils, like the Germans or something, or the Italians or something. But these individual human beings, there are nothing for them, and they are like, it doesn't matter if some one of them die, or some of them has to go away or something. And that's not very a Catholic way to see the world, because just human beings, the individuals can worship God and can praise Him, and not a nation or a state or something. So in this case, like, maybe we could say that for the nation is, for the fascists, more or less that what we Catholics see like the church or God, because that's our highest, that's our or the highest point, and not the nation. Yes.
But that sounds fairly similar to communism, then, in terms at least of how the individual is seen. Is that kind of similar, at least in that way, not in terms of government formation, but in terms of how they view the state? Kenneth, maybe you can answer that. Sorry.
Yeah, well, it's interesting when you say that. My principal at the old Novus Ordo school that I taught at, he used to say it about capitalism, that like ultra capitalism and like ultra socialism were actually two sides of the same coin, because it turns out a lot of the end results on society end up looking the same. But perhaps it's more aptly put with fascism and communism as being two sides of the same coin. And I think, for Catholics to reflect on this, just look at what happened to Poland between Nazi Germany and communist Russia. They basically, signed a non-aggression pact and then split Poland between the two of them, which was a tragic moment in history. So yeah, that's what I would say about that. That's an apt comparison.
Yeah, poor Poland, right? They were the punching bag of the 20th century, and just unbelievable. It really, you got punched in the gut and then turned around and got punched in the face, and they had it brutal. I know I have listeners from Poland too. Well, that's a whole nother podcast to talk about just Poland of the 20th century. But Christian, I mean, what do you ever get this? Do you hear this where people start to glorify fascism, especially in Italy? I hear it very often about Mussolini and about how he was actually this true friend of the papal states, or I guess it wasn't the papal states at the time, but of Rome and of the papacy. What do you have to say about that, or do you hear that ever?
Yeah, I already heard that, but I have to say that's so not not true, because for sure you can say, okay, Mussolini was not that bad like Hitler was, like, because Hitler, he killed thousands and millions of people and had like was a very big, a huge racist, and like killed Jews and something like that. So he was completely anti-church, anti-Catholic, anti-Christianity. But Mussolini, maybe he is not the baddest guy in the 20th century here in Europe, but he's not, for sure, he's not a good one, because also like his movement, his fascist movement, is something you cannot be a fascist and a member of the Catholic Church. Like, even when you, for example, you have just to look what bishops in Italy said in the very beginning of the 20s, in the 20th century. So at the very beginning, like, Mussolini founded his fascist movement in 1919, and even like in the beginning of the 20s, the many of the Italian bishops said that you cannot be Catholic and a fascist at the same time, because um, the because that what Mussolini do, what the fascists do, that's very anti the evangelics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The
And
Gospels, yeah.
or the Gospels, right? Because they like, that's like we said, what we said already, that's they glorify just the state, and they have no space in their ideology for God or for belief in something. And so, even like, maybe in Italy, the fascists don't kill their enemies in a system like the German National Socialists did, but at least, like, when just in the first 3 years or 2.5 years, when they start forcing their goals and something, they killed over 3,000 people, just because they are in their way, because yeah, because they're between them and their goal. And so, when just a little, or a movement with a few 100,000 members, just killed in a few years over 3,000 people, that's a very clear aspect that's not good. Sorry.
And it's something that I know that, again, people say, yeah, but Mussolini, I don't remember exactly the historical reference, but he was helping out the Pope, and he was friends with him, and he was doing this, and this. But it's also like, okay, also look exactly what happened in Poland. The fascists were purely trying to do everything they could to help out themselves. That there was no friendliness, there was no, hey, altruistic. It was just purely, oh, okay, if I sign this deal with the Pope, then I will get, this, and this. The people will vote for me again, or however. I haven't done that much research into Mussolini, but I think, again, it's just the people who are pro Mussolini and fascism, I think they only look at part of the story, right? They just say, oh, look, there were some things they did that were good. Oh, and they weren't as bad as the communists, and the communists have taken over the world. The fascists were the only ones in the way. I mean, Kenneth, do you have any comment for that? You know, the fascists were the only ones standing in the way of communism.
Well, yeah, if I could just speak to the first thing that you pointed out, the Lateran Treaty of 1929 is what people point to say that Mussolini was a friend of the church. But then if you look historically at what happened after that passed, Mussolini started to suppress Catholic newspapers more than he ever had before that treaty was signed. And it actually led to the writing of an encyclical by Pope Pius XI. I'm going to butcher the name of it. It's Non Abbiamo Bisogno, I think. I don't speak Italian, but it basically was denouncing Italian fascism, and that was written shortly after the Lateran Treaty. So it's kind of like ignoring the rest of the story to just focus in on that one aspect of what Mussolini did. Because, as to your point, he didn't do it out of altruism and he cared about the church. He did it for what was good for his political power. And for the second thing that you said, I mean, the church was obviously the rock against all of the chaos in the world that was happening. So to view fascism as the last chance against the spread of communism would be to completely look at the world through a secular lens and ignore the fact that Christ established a church that would guide us through everything. So I mean, that's kind of what I would say about that. I do, the devil, the devil's in the details, I guess you can say, or give the devil his due, in the sense that I understand, I'm sympathetic in the sense that when you look at some of the social teaching, I mean, the euthanasia programs, don't get me wrong, I'm not supporting that, but if you look at their defense of traditional marriage, for instance, like, they were much more in line with the church's teaching than the communists were. But just because they're a little bit better, to Christian's point, yeah, Mussolini might not be as bad as Hitler, but let's not paint him out to be like a saint or some role model for us to follow, when he was suppressing Catholic political parties and Catholic newspapers that were loyal to the magisterium. And Christian, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on that as well.
Yes, I would also want to say something about that, because like especially in Italy, for example, we had like this situation that at some points the Catholic Church and the fascists worked together or had a coexistence, like, because Mussolini was in some points like friendly to the church, but it doesn't. The main points were, for example, that Mussolini was also or fought against like the communism and the
Liberalism. Yeah.
Thank you. And also the Catholic Church was against that, for sure. It was also a big thing in these days, but it doesn't mean in this case that like that the fascists made something positive, made something good for the church. Like it was always the same. Like the church had also they always fought for their rights, and in some points Mussolini gave the church the space or something, or was not so aggressive like Hitler was. Yeah, but and also in some, like, for a few years, I think in the late 20s or something, he was very like formal friendly to the Catholic Church, because he knew that most of the people in Italy were Catholics, and so it is not possible, or in these days it was not possible to control the whole state with, and at the same time to try to destroy the Catholic Church, because that's the main point of identification was the main point for identification for the Italians, and so he had to calm down for a few years because the Catholic Church was still strong. But I'm sure when when we just think about the Nazis and also like the fascists in Italy would won the Second World War, we had now we had like right after the war a very different situation, also in Italy. So there were it's I cannot say it often enough. They were against all these moral things and moral standards what the Catholic Church was for. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had read a book a few months ago called the Church of Spies. It's really interesting. It's about Pope Pius XII and how he was not pro-Nazi as he is often accused of. I mean, slanderously accused of, and it's an absolute joke that they say that he was pro-Nazi, and it's absolutely a lie. I mean, it's totally proven in this book. It just didn't happen. He was very, very anti-Nazi, and he even was very publicly anti-Nazi until the bishops of Germany told him to please stop saying these things because it's making Hitler punish us more. And so it's just it's
He was
all a complete fabrication.
he was even
Christian.
the first. He was even the very first in the higher Catholic hierarchy, even before the German bishops. Like I think he said it in the year 27 that like this guy Hitler is a very bad one, and when we will not stop him, he would bring us to bring a lot of bad things to this country. So he talked about Germany. So he
Wow.
said that even like in a letter, I think he wrote that to Rome or something when he was like the nuncius here in Munich.
In Germany, exactly. And so it's
Uh,
like it's again one of these crazy things that they act like he supported this, but he knew what was coming and even tried to warn people about it. And it just shows you though that and this is where the conspiracy theories come from, I think, is that people see, okay, they, whoever it is, the media, those who write the history books, they portray the church as always being the bad guys. And now they're portraying the Nazis as being the bad guys. And well, they always lie, which means the Nazis must be good, right? And that's I think that's actually what's coming through this. And obviously, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, sometimes
yeah,
maybe they don't tell the whole truth, but they can still tell some of the truth. The Nazis were not good. I mean, at all. Come on, guys.
like it's like the same when, for example, when we say, okay, now when we define the fascist movements in the 20th century in Europe, like as a part of the so-called reaction movement against like liberalism and communism, then for sure it could be a logic way to say, okay, now they cannot be that bad like the media said that because they are part of our reaction movement, like. And but that's not true because fascism is not a part of reaction movement. It's also a revolution. Like it's also like it's like Kenneth said, it's the same. It's the other part of the medal, like from the communism stuff. Like it's there is no, because the systems are more or less the same, and also like how they act, it's very very close to each other.
Yeah, and as communism was spreading its errors, and don't get us wrong, communism is one of the worst evils of the last centuries. That's not a question. And Our Lady warned us about it, and they killed millions of people and starved millions of people. So again, but it's not mutually exclusive. I just think it gets to be such a silly argument that it's like, well, they were stopping the communists. Well, kinda, and not really. I mean, at first Hitler, again, he was allies with the communists, with Russia, and then for some reason he decided to invade them, which I don't think anyone will ever know why he decided to invade them. But it wasn't altruism. It wasn't like, hey, I, leader of the great German people, will go snuff out the communists. I mean, come on. I don't know why he did it, but it wasn't for that.
Have
I
to
think that's
defend
for
the
sure.
free world, you know.
Yeah,
Well,
by
and
that logic, I mean, the liberals also were trying to stop communism. So, I mean, I guess that means liberalism's good. And it's like, no, just like, I mean, the Cold War was literally American liberalism versus Russian communism. That doesn't mean American liberalism is in line with Catholic social teaching. It just means they were against something that the church was also against. So it's kind of the same thing with Nazism. Sure, Nazis didn't like communists, but that doesn't mean they're our best friends or anything.
No, and I mean you can go to these camps that existed, and they killed Catholics here in Dachau near Germany near Munich. I was there a couple years ago, and they have an entire section that showed the internment and execution, or at least deaths, of the Catholic priests. And there were many, there were dozens of these priests, because the priests were speaking out against Hitler. I imagine because the Pope was too, and so the priests were saying, "Hey, this can't be," and the priests were stinking around behind the Nazis and trying to help people out, and maybe they're trying to help the Jews escape, and they were also sent to prisons and killed. So again, it's not like whatever numbers you think happened in this time, and we're not going to debate that here. There's no reason to debate it. The Hitler and the Nazis were evil, and some of these evils still exist. I in Germany am still not allowed to homeschool my kids because, well, Hitler put that rule in place, and it has never changed, which is pretty crazy when you think, again, the how much control the government wants to have over my kids, and it's just part of that totalitarianism, right? So in a way, it kind of still exists.
Yeah, or Kenneth.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, it's what you say, that Kevin, that like all the, like, for instance, the Nazis and the National Socialists here in Germany, they want also like the full control, the complete control about the people, about the kids, about everything, like
Hair color, eye color, yeah.
everything, yes, everything. And you cannot be serious and say that that is something you want to live in, because I read a lot, I did a lot of research stuff, like what, because the National Socialist movement here in Germany starts more or less in Munich, and so Munich has a big or like tradition is the wrong word, but like it's a part of the city, and I'm a city historian, more or less, and also like I did a lot of research stuff about that, and more and more I read about that, and read newspapers or letters from these times, or like just stuff from this time. As more or less see, it gets clearer and clearer for me that that was something very evil. For when you like you just have to read uh, the letters or the speeches of Pater Rupert Meyer. He was a Catholic priest here in Munich, a very famous one. He was also a few years in the concentration camp in Dachau. And what he said about that, and what he preached or something about these evil guys, evil guys, really, and what he said, what they did, and after he said that, they brought him right to the concentration camp to want to kill him, and that was an evil time here for the people here. Like, you cannot. It was forbidden to say your free speech here on the streets. Yeah, it was not to say something against the government. It was like playing with your life when you said that. Yeah, and you cannot say that that is a good system. That's a system or a state where people want to live, or a good. It was a good period. No, it wasn't, because the people were all the time just fear to say the wrong thing, or because at the end, like, you were deported to some point, and nobody really knew that what they will do with you then there, but you never will come back, that for sure. And so you just have to read documents from this time to see very clear that is very not Christian, not a Christian way, and even not a human way. Like, it's just very evil.
Kenneth, comment?
Yeah, I wanted to actually ask Christian what his thoughts are on. He was a bishop, but he eventually became a cardinal. Cardinal Clemens von Galen. I definitely Anglicanized that. Have you heard his story and what he denounced?
He was bishop in Münster. It's a kind of a city in Germany, And he's also like, his nickname was the Lion of Münster, because he was a very strong fighter against, or a loud fighter at least, against the National Socialists. He said it very clear and very loud and very often that the people, to his people in the church, or in his letters, or in his sermons, and something like that, that that the Nazis were evil, and you cannot vote for them, or you cannot be part of the movement when you want to be a good Catholic. And the Nazis had big trouble with him, because they actually wanted to put him away to a concentration camp, or to kill him, but it was impossible, because he was so famous guy, and so many people in Münster and his diocese loved him, and he was a very famous. And this, I think, this fact saved his life. But like, or the Cardinal Faulhaber here in Munich, he wrote the first version of the encyclica Mit brennender Sorge from Pius XI and Pacelli. So later he was Pius XII, Pope Pius XII. He wrote the last version of this encyclica, and in this encyclica, it was like in the year,
I think it's 1937.
37, like before the war, even before the war. Like, and in this encyclica, the Pope damned all these points, because because the National Socialists were not Catholic, and not Catholic is too simple, evil, just evil. And we have, and like, also like the fact that the Catholic Church in Germany was, during the time of the Third Reich, the biggest resistance, like the resistance movement against this thing. And why should the Catholic Church be the biggest resistance movement against a movement who is maybe not so bad? So that's not logical. And so we have to say it very clear that they were not good guys. And like, yeah.
Perfect. Kenneth, any last words about the Nazis? Because I want to go to one last fascist leader in Spain, who I'm sure you guys know who I'm going to talk about, because that's a little bit of a different story. And I know that we didn't prepare for Franco, but I think it's an interesting topic by itself, because it's not quite the same. He was not an evil guy, but maybe, not a hero either. But do you have any last words about fascism in Italy or Germany?
The one thing that I would want to point out is, unfortunately, there are people that say that the Holocaust never happened, or they question the numbers and stuff like that. And I mean, again, just study before what actually happened, because the claim is that, since they always lie, once the concentration camps were discovered by the communists, they just made this whole thing up. It's not actually real. But as we just said, if you look at before the war even happened, there was the Action T4 that was passed by Hitler, which was a euthanasia program in which undesirables were being forcibly killed through medical procedures. So Hitler, long before the war even happened, was using eugenics. He praised the American eugenics movement from the American Birth Control League, Margaret Sanger, and said that he took her ideas and implemented them in Germany. So for people to then say that the Holocaust was a myth, a lie, to try and make a certain group look like victims when they actually weren't, that's just, I'm sorry, that's just not historically possible to argue. I mean, I guess you can point to some inconsistencies, but at the end of the day, we all should know that Hitler wanted to exterminate certain groups of people that he deemed undesirable long before World War II even happened. That is an established historical fact that's not up for debate. So that's the last thing I wanted to say about that, because you had mentioned it, Kevin, And I didn't get the chance to jump in on that, and I was like, yeah, no, you can't say that.
Christian?
One last comment, maybe about like what Kenneth said, like this eugenic program, what the Nazis did, and like who was responsible for the fact that like in the 30s, or in the late 30s, I think, the Nazis stopped this eugenic program because it was this bishop from Münster. It was this von Galen, the Lion of Münster, and so now that in this case you can see it very clearly the opposite of these two points, because what the Nazis did the eugenic program, and the Catholic Church stopped that. So there is no connection. So
Beautiful.
If
Perfect.
I could just tell one quick story, my
Do it.
principal at the current school that I work at, he rips off his calendar is a History Channel calendar, and it like has a fun fact for the day, and he'll like give it to members of the school. And just recently, I think it was August 1st or maybe August 2nd, it said on that calendar thing, the speech by Bishop von Galen, who denounced the action program. And then 20 days later, my principal gave me another one, and it said that Hitler shut down that program because of the popular like rise of Catholics against the program by his speech. So his sermon, I should say, not speech, led German Catholics to like fight back, and then Hitler actually caved. He shut down the program, at least temporarily. He shut it down because he was getting so much publicity, negative publicity, for his regime. So yeah, sorry, that's the last thing I'll say.
No, it's beautiful. I think it's a perfect way to end that part of it, and just to say again, these are there's no denying it. Just stop trying to make these guys heroes. They weren't. They're bad. They're evil. Period. Okay, on to the next, which is this is a little harder. And again, I didn't prepare you guys at all for this, so no worries if you're not studied up on this topic. But Francisco Franco is another one that comes up a lot, and he becomes again this heroic figure. He becomes this figure that we all should kind of idolize, and he's the last true leader. And I think there's I haven't studied that much into Franco, but I think there's some truth in that there was really the last traditional leader in the world, perhaps what may have been Franco, but I don't know that much about it. I mean, who wants to? Maybe we'll start with Kenneth. Kenneth, do you have any thoughts on Franco?
So, yeah, if I could just tell a funny story, I mean, Franco never joined like officially Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. He was always like neutral. I mean, he did send, I think, like a squadron to go fight in the Soviet Union when the Nazis invaded. But he still, to the end of the war, stayed neutral, much to Adolf Hitler's chagrin. He actually said in a letter that he would rather pull out all of his teeth himself than talk to Franco again. So, I mean, as we're saying, like the Nazis were not good guys, and if Franco, I mean, maybe this is a fallacy, but like Franco did annoy Hitler so much that Hitler wanted to tear all of his teeth out, not talk to the guy. So, and we know that Franco was Catholic. So, I personally am a lot less like combative or dismissive of people who idolize Franco, but he's not perfect. I could talk more about some of the things that were concerning, but Christian, I would love to hear your thoughts about Franco.
yeah, it's like that's a problem now, because it's no problem because Franco is not like he's not like the bad guy like Mussolini, or for sure like Hitler was. And maybe in his case, it's maybe like you can say it was not completely wrong what he did. because like Kenneth said, he was Catholic, and during his like reign, during his dictatorship, like it's also like very interesting that he was not like, because he was not part of the Second World War, he was neutral, his country, and so he was like dictator till his death in the 70s. So it was long time after Second World War, and he was not that, yeah, he was not that violency maybe like the others, and he also was like, he was a Catholic. A very nice story about that is about his wife, because in Oviedo, it's a city in north Spain. There is, in the cathedral there is the how you call it, Holy Shroud of Oviedo. It's like the cloth what was on the face of Jesus Christ after his death on the cross, and it's there with the blood of Jesus Christ on it and something. And his wife was very impressed about that. And then now when you like look very close to this cloth, then you can see her like a little picture or from her lips on this cloth, because she kissed it, because she was so impressed about that. And so you can see that in a way there were more, that's yeah, they were kind of Catholic, but it's also like not very clear, because on the other hand, also Franco did very bad things when he got to the power, like in the civil war in the 30s in Spain. He also killed Catholic priests and Catholics and something like that, but not in this huge numbers. And maybe you could say that in his early times he was more like Franco, but in his late times he was like kind of not the baddest thing.
You mean he
And
was
also,
more like Hitler? You mean in the early
no, no,
days?
no, 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 no. He was like kind of a good guy, but
Okay.
I'm not sure about that. And you also have to know that the influence of what the Catholic Church had on Franco was much bigger than on Mussolini, and for sure bigger than in Germany. So there was kind of a strong existence between the Catholic Church and Franco, and also um, like he also supported in a way, at least like after the war, the Catholic Church. And so yeah, it's kind of, I don't read so much. I didn't read so much about him, so it's hard to give a,
Yeah, full judgment on. Yeah, I think
yeah.
that's generally how
But
most people see him, right? It's
but at least I would also say that at the end of the day, he was also a dictator. He was also like kind of a fascist, and he also like had um, forced ideas during his dictatorship, which were not very Catholic, and which were against like the Catholic Church. Like what we said in our definition at the very beginning. For him, also the state was the highest point. Like he also like had the Catholic Church in his country, like it's a good thing, and the people should go to church. But over the church in his country is his dictatorship. Is the state, is the nation, and that's all. Yeah, like and I have, with this fact, I have problems.
Kenneth, any comments on that?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. What's interesting is, from what I recall, when he first, well, okay, the first thing to note that most trads have a problem with Mussolini, Franco, is that he didn't restore the, I think it's the Carlists, which is the traditional monarchs in Spain. Instead, he basically allowed I think he basically didn't name a king, but I think as he was dying, he allowed the Alfonsists back on the throne. And so a lot of traditional people have gripes with him there, where it was like he promised the Carlists. There's a book by Warren H. Carroll. I actually have it right behind me. The Rise and Fall of the Communist Revolution, and he has a chapter in it on Franco. And he does a really good job displaying the good things about Franco, like all the Catholic things that Christian just mentioned, but then also where he kind of failed. Like he promised the Carlists, who were the most passionate and dedicated soldiers for the nationalists in the Spanish Civil War, that he would put a Carlist on the throne, and then he didn't do that. So there's obviously things you can look at and be like, what the heck, man? But like not nearly as much as when you look at Mussolini and Hitler. And the fact that he stayed neutral and didn't join the Axis, I think makes him, and the fact that we actually know that he was Catholic more so in the sense that Mussolini was. That was just mostly a facade, and Hitler was just an apostate. At least Franco, to Christian's point, showed devotions, and his wife showed like sincere devotions that we can hang our hats on. And he fought communists and prevented a communist takeover in Spain. So to me, whenever someone says that they like Franco, I have a few things that I feel like that guy who's like, well, actually, to like point a few things out that he didn't do that was great. But for the most part, I mean, I'll take him over Mussolini and Hitler any day.
Well, and I guess for me, it comes down to this, and I think I'm with you with that. I don't really care if someone likes Franco, but why is it that we can't go back to someone like King St. Louis, or that there's a lot of even warrior king saints? I mean, incredible saints, Saint Stephen,
Monarchy is dead.
I know it is, and I know it's a long way back, but I mean, there are so many kings that were saintly and holy and manly, and I mean, and warrior saints. Why can't we look to them as role models? Why are we going to Franco and Mussolini and Hitler, for goodness sake? I mean, really? Are they the last role models that that we're going to? These are the examples we're trying to find, people who, at the best, we're looking at Franco, who did some good things. I mean, it's like, come on, is that really what we're going to settle for in our role models for manhood or leadership? And now I understand St. Louis was 800 years ago, but better than settling for someone who's just maybe okay, right? And I think that's kind of where I'm at with it, is stop trying to find heroes in people that just weren't. I mean, I guess that's my final words. Just stop. I mean, some of it is just purely fictional, as we see with the Nazis. That is a fictional thing to think that they're good. False. It's just false. Mussolini also not good, bad guy. Maybe not as evil still. There's nothing heroic about him. And Franco, So I'm going to ask you both. I really appreciate you both coming on. Good grief, I could talk to you guys for hours about any historical topic. We're going to have to do this again about some other topic. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to ask you last words maybe on fascism or anything you want to talk about. Christian, I'll go to you first. Anything you want to tell the listeners or viewers?
Yeah, maybe that point what you also said, that like why we should find our heroes or our role models in this time, in this very not so good time in human history. So why we should not look a little bit more back, for example, like in my case here in Bavaria, like Duke Maximilian I in the 17th century. He was like one of the greatest leaders and the best leaders this country ever had. And he was the archetype of a Catholic duke, of a Catholic king or something. Yeah. And so why we should not start to read their lives more and try to compare it ourselves to them or something, or like just to wish we could have someday a leader like him again. Why we should not go to the optimum. Yeah? It's like when we could say Franco, like maybe Franco is kind of a half-time hero, maybe, but at least when you said something against him, you also were playing with your life. So at the end of the day, when the problem is not that maybe some of these fascist leaders are not so bad than the others, or some maybe in a way good. The point is that the ideology, what it all of these systems based off, like the fascism, it's not it's not you cannot connect it to Christianity. So and in this case we should have distance, because we should say, okay, Franco was a good thing, but yeah, like the but is why we should do that. So at the end of the day, just forget that.
Forget fascism. Perfect. Kenneth, last words?
I guess I would just like to reiterate that really the idolizing of at least Nazism is mostly done by like straight up pagans. Like I mean, if you go down that rabbit hole, most of the videos that you will find are from people who are self-professed Norse pagan or old Germanic pagan. And that's at the end of the day what Nazi ideology was about. And that's what our popes in their encyclicals called it. They called it paganism of the state. So I just want to reiterate for anyone out there who defends the Nazis, or the fascists were also called pagans of the state. So either one of those, if you're a defender of them because they fought communists, I just want to, as a traditional Catholic, we actually read the encyclicals and listen to our popes, and they condemned fascism and National Socialism. So you have to stay away from it. Like, and I'm not saying that as some guy, like the popes said it. So, and then if you actually just read a lot of history books that aren't like YouTube videos about conspiracies, you'll see a lot of the things that you're being told just don't actually hold up when you study the actual documents. As Christian said, the best thing you can do is just read the primary sources yourself without a commentator telling you what to think. Just, well, don't do that with the Bible, but as a historian, you should do that, and you'll be amazed at some of the things that people just gloss over or they don't mention. So, yeah, and for Franco, just one other thing: the bombing of Guernica. I think I pronounced that right, Guernica. You can look that up. He denied it, that it ever happened, that it was an abuse of human rights, and he would lock people up who mentioned it after the war. But like even like Pablo Picasso made a painting of the bombing of Guernica. So that's just an example of him not necessarily being saint-like, having some. Basically, he let the Nazis bomb this town for a strategic point, and there were civilians there, and civilians died, and the Franco regime denied that it ever happened. So if I could just throw that out there for another thing about Franco. But those are my final thoughts.
Perfect, guys. I really appreciate it. Seriously, this is the kind of stuff I could talk about every week. I don't know how many people are going to be interested in hearing about fascism, but I think the most important thing is the few. Even if we get 5 views and there are 5 people who are kind of like, maybe Hitler was a good guy. I hope this showed you that no, not good. Stay away from it. Find good sources. Find good saints to be proud of and to have as your role models. Stay away from all this garbage. The Catholic Church, as Kenneth said perfectly, it is condemned. There's nothing else we need to say. The Catholic Church says no to it. So,
and the best way to be anti-communism also is to be Catholic. So you don't need a fascist.
Exactly. The best way to be anti anything bad, anything evil, is to be a Catholic. And that is how we'll end it. Christian, Kenneth, thank you so much. And until next time, God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.